Leading Britain's conversation, LBC. Prime Minister Theresa May takes your calls. 0345 6060 973. This is LBC.
Morning, Chip. 8 o'clock on Friday, November the 16th, and here in the studio with me, the Prime Minister. And it's certainly been a tough 2 and a bit years since she took over the job, and it's certainly been a tough 2.5 days or 3 days since then. And we're taking your calls in just a moment. Prime Minister, I haven't seen you since the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham. You been up to much?
Just this and that, Nick.
Just this and that. Before we go to the first call, when did you last hear from Michael Gove, and what did he say?
Oh, well, I had a very good conversation with Michael yesterday. Actually, one of the things we've been discussing is one of the really important things, I think, for a lot of people in this negotiation is the thing that they think, one of the things they think went wrong when we went into Europe, which is the fishing industry and making sure that we're actually able to come out of this, able to, rebuild our fishing industry.
Have you offered him the role of Brexit Secretary?
Now, I don't talk about things to do with the cabinet reshuffle. I haven't appointed a new Brexit secretary yet, but obviously I'll be doing that over the course of the next day or so.
If I were a betting man, or if you were a betting man, could I go down the bookies and talk about that, about Michael Gove? Is he worth putting money on?
I have to say, Nick, I've always made it a sort of rule in my life that I don't bet on anything to do with politics.
Right.
I'd advise you not to either.
All right, we'll have to watch and wait and see. To the first call, Daniel's in Louth. Daniel, you're through to the Prime Minister. Go ahead.
Good morning, Prime Minister.
Good morning, Daniel.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you this morning? What's it like up in Louth today?
Very, very cloudy and overcast.
All right. Perhaps we'll move to Brexit issues now, Daniel, if that's sort of. I can gain a little control with the great respect to Prime Minister. Daniel, your question.
Sorry. Yes. And firstly, I just want to say, I know you've had a very hard task, and I commend you for trying to negotiate any kind of deal with the EU. But it's also clear from the outset you tried to find a middle ground to offer for everyone, and sadly that's not worked. I'm a Conservative voter. I'm a local councillor. I proudly and vocally stood up and said leave the EU, and I wanted to take back control of the money, borders and laws, and I wanted Parliament to be sovereign. And obviously, no doubt you will argue once again that your deal does this, but there's so much in the small print that shows us not be the case. There are sections that commit the EU to a never-ending backstop unless the EU agrees it's okay for us to leave. There's obviously impacts on our principles of the referendum, meaning we will obviously continue to pay into the EU, have our rules dictated by Brussels, and potentially have to accept free movement. I know you will argue that this backstop is to be avoided, but why would the EU accept a deal when they know they can keep the UK in its position? Furthermore, you have suffered 7 ministerial resignations. Parliament obviously not vote for this, and to govern this country, you need to command the majority of the House. So please, Prime Minister, tell me, why do you think you should stay on as PM when you have failed, despite your no doubt honourable intentions to want this referendum result? And if you cannot do that, I respectfully ask you to do the right thing in the national interest and stand down to allow someone from the Brexit camp to take the lead. There is still time to sort this out.
Let's turn to the Prime Minister. Daniel, thank you. I might let you in for a response. Prime Minister.
Yeah, well, thanks very much, Daniel. And actually, you covered an awful lot there in your question. So if I may just go into several of the points that you made. Can I just you mentioned sovereignty as a really important issue for you. And I think you're absolutely right. For a lot of people who voted leave, what they wanted to do is to make sure that decisions on things like who could come into this country would be taken by us here in the UK and not by Brussels. And that's exactly what the deal I've negotiated delivers. So we will see an end to free movement. I think this is absolutely crucial. You mentioned there that in this backstop arrangement, which I'll come on to in a minute, there would be free movement. No, there wouldn't, actually. There's no obligation in relation to free movement in the backstop. And when we ensure that we get the future relationship in place with the EU, free movement will end once and for all. And I know that's a really important matter for a lot of people.
That's a big when, though. Sorry to interrupt, Prime Minister. You say when you get that deal. There's no guarantee of when that might be.
Well, everything in the deal is about working really hard and doing our best to make sure that's there by the 1st of January 2021. What we've done is we're leaving next March. That's the first thing to say to all your listeners. We're leaving the European Union on the 29th of March 2019. There's then going to be a period of time up to the end of December 2020 for businesses to be adjusting to what the new relationship we're going to have with the EU will be.
But what my listeners might wonder, what can you achieve in 21 months that you've not been able to achieve in over 2 years?
Well, because those 21 months will be based on part of what we've decided and what we've agreed in those 2 years. Because although Daniel, I recognise, because you've particularly referenced the backstop, and I know there's a lot of concern about the backstop, and I fully recognise that, and I have some of those concerns myself. But obviously alongside that, what's called the withdrawal agreement, backstop's part of that. is the future relationship, the document that says, here's the basis on which we're going to continue to cooperate with the European Union on things like working together to deal with organised crime and terrorism. Here's the way in which we're going to be able to continue to trade with the European Union in the future. And it will be the case in that future relationship that Parliament will have the ability to decide who comes into our country, how we spend our money, so we can spend the money we're sending to the EU today on our NHS and other priorities, and determine our laws.
Daniel, thank you for that. I want to get the opportunity as many people as possible. You probably want him to come back, Daniel, but I must move on. Michael in Derry, appropriately enough. Michael, you're on the radio, through to the Prime Minister. Go ahead.
Yep, morning Nick and morning Prime Minister.
Morning, sir.
As Nick has already stated there, I'm from the north, and obviously when we voted in the majority to remain, myself included, I actually feel that the Prime Minister's deal would be of a huge benefit to the region. However, can the Prime Minister give any assurances to the people of the north that the bespoke deal negotiated wouldn't be scuppered by her confidence and supply partners within the DUP?
Well, thanks very much, Michael, for saying, because I think one of the things we've been trying to do is to ensure that people living in Northern Ireland, businesses in Northern Ireland, can carry on as they do today and won't see any problems arising as a result of us leaving the EU in relation to the border with Ireland. But when this deal is finalised, and there's a meeting a week on Sunday with the EU Council, when this deal is finalised and comes back to Parliament, I hope every single member of Parliament is going to look at the need to ensure that we deliver on the referendum, deliver on the result of the referendum for the British people, and think about the impact on our overall national interest, on our economy, and also on the jobs of their constituents. And I'm doing my job. I'm bringing back what I believe to be the best deal for Britain, and MPs will then do their job and thinking about the impact of that on their constituents.
But Northern Ireland will be treated differently, won't it, from the rest of the United Kingdom as part of this deal?
Well, no. You see, this is, if I can, in one sense, can I give an explanation, Nick, which may seem a bit lengthy?
Please.
There's two bits to the deal, and this is very crucial. One bit of it is this treaty that is about how we leave the European Union. This is things like, if you're a business today and you've got a contract with a country in the European Union that's going to extend beyond the date at which we leave, what happens to your contract?
Right.
What happens to that business? So things like that have had to be looked at, and that's part of that withdrawal agreement.
But is it true
separately,
that the EU can impose a different VAT rate on Northern Ireland, as has been written yesterday?
No,
currently? This
is not about the decisions about VAT. We will be responsible
during
for that.
The transition period.
During the question people have asked, and this is where it gets slightly more complex, but the question people have asked about what's called this backstop arrangement. Yeah. Now, the point of the backstop is to say that even if we can't get our future relationship in by, you asked me what date, by the beginning of 2021, if there's a short period of time when we can't move to that future relationship, we need to make sure that Northern Ireland's border is still fully open with Ireland.
Yes.
And that's what the backstop's about.
Yeah, so it is effectively still more under the EU's control than it is the UK's.
It will be, what we've negotiated is to make sure there's no customs border down the Irish Sea, which is absolutely crucial to me, that we didn't have Northern Ireland being separated off in that sense. They would be ensuring they're keeping some regulations the same as with the EU.
But if I remind you of Lancaster House last year, Prime Minister, you said this would strengthen the Union. This doesn't seem to me to be strengthening the United Kingdom.
We are maintaining the integrity of the United Kingdom, Nick. Look, what the EU wanted was effectively to separate Northern Ireland out away from the rest of the UK. We said no.
They wanted a hard border?
They wanted a customs border down the Irish Sea.
That's what they said.
That's what they said. They said that back in February. We said no immediately. We've been saying no ever since. And in October, they finally said, OK, we accept, we have to do it in a different way. So we've now got it being done in a different way.
And this is the biggest point of intransigence, would you say?
No, there have been quite a few. There have been quite a lot of areas. I know one of the things, Daniel, when he rang up, spoke about sovereignty. One of the key things a lot of people have worried about is this European Court business. How much can the European Court do to the UK once we're out? The answer is we will no longer be under the jurisdiction of the European Court.
Right. We move on. Just lastly, it's been reported that sources close to Arlene Foster, I remind the listeners, leader of the DUP, says they're ready to withdraw support unless there's a change of Prime Minister. Are you aware of this?
I'm aware of lots of things that are written and rumoured, Nick. Is
it true? Have you had a rather testy exchange with Arlene Foster?
I haven't had a testy exchange with Arlene on that. We've had exchanges with the DUP.
You still enjoy
on
her support, the support of her party?
We've had exchanges with the DUP about the issue in relation to Northern Ireland. They've raised some questions with us. They've raised some concerns with us. And yes, we're looking at those. So one of the issues is, what can we do in the UK ourselves? Nothing to do with the deal with the EU. What can we do in the UK to help to reassure not just the DUP, but the people of Northern Ireland?
And so you've still got her support, the DUP support?
Yes, we're still working with the DUP.
And they'll vote for this deal, do you think?
We will see how every Member of Parliament's going to vote for this deal.
But you're confident they'll vote for it?
I am confident that Members of Parliament, when they see this deal, when it comes back, when they look at it, they will be saying to themselves...
Including the DUP. Sorry to stress this point. The DUP will be voting with you.
Look, when this vote comes back, every individual Member of Parliament will decide how they vote, whether they're a member of the DUP, Conservative, Labour, all the parties within the House of Commons. My job is to persuade... first and foremost, my Conservative benches, those who are working with us, the DUP are working with us, obviously in confidence and supply. But I want to be able to say to all parliamentarians, every MP, I believe truly believe this is the best deal for Britain.
Julia's in Llanelli. Julia, you're through to the Prime Minister. Go ahead.
Hi, Nick. Hi, Prime Minister.
Hello.
Thank you for talking. I'm glad you are talking to the people about this now. I just need to ask, I'm disabled, I'm bedridden, I take lots of medicines and need appliances to keep me alive so I can be with my family. I just would like to ask about the provision the draft agreement makes to guarantee access to medicines in the future and in the future relationship. How long will sick people have to be worrying whether they're going to be getting their medicines?
Well, Julie, you've raised a really important point, and I think this is something that people have asked. Both, if we weren't going to get a deal, what would happen? And the Department of Health is making sure that medicines will continue to be available in that circumstance.
Is that called stockpiling, Prime Minister?
It's making proper contingency, Nick, to make sure that if there's a problem, if there are any problems at the border, that medicines can still get through and that they're available for people. But the next issue, which you've absolutely rightly raised, Julie, is about the whole question of what happens in the future. And what we're doing is, within the agreement, we're looking at the relationship we have with something called the European Medicines Agency, and this is about making sure that drugs will still be and medicines will still be available in the UK. And it's about the process, if new drugs come on board, how do we ensure that those drugs are available as easily in the UK as they will be elsewhere in Europe?
In the Cabinet meeting, when Matt Hancock, the Health Secretary, said in a case of a no-deal scenario, he couldn't guarantee no one would die as a result of that no deal, how did you react?
Well, first of all, I don't normally talk about what's said in Cabinet, but I'm not sure that's exactly what Matt did say. But what is happening is the Department of Health is working very, very carefully with the various companies that supply the medicines. Look, I have to say, Nick, this is an issue that actually I feel personally. I'm a type 1 diabetic. I depend on insulin every day. As it happens, my insulin is produced by a company in the European Union, so elsewhere in the European Union.
Which country does it come from?
Denmark.
Right. Okay.
So, I know that this is an issue that is a matter of importance to people, and the Department of Health is ensuring that it is making all the steps that if we go to no deal, and look, I believe that we've got a good deal from the European... We've still got some things to sort out with them, but I believe we've got a good deal from the European Union, and that's what I'll put to Parliament.
All right. As you mentioned your condition, how has it been affected by the incredible workload you've had to put in over the last few weeks? I don't know how diabetes is measured. Has your blood level gone up, gone down, gone across, or however it works?
Well, what you have to do when you're a diabetic is you're measuring your blood sugar level during the day, and you manage the condition.
So if you're stressed, does it go up or down? I don't know how blood sugar works. Fortunately, I'm not diabetic. Yet.
No.
Yet.
It will, well, if you're stressed, if there's a lot of adrenaline, it will tend to go up. But you manage that with the amount of insulin you're putting in.
And that's how you regulate it. I see. OK. Thank you, Julie. Max in Lewisham. Max, you're on the radio. Good morning to you.
Yeah, good morning, Nick. Good morning, Prime Minister.
Good morning.
Yes. Well, I work in NHS, and I've been in NHS for over 8 years now. From this deal that you've got from Brussels, I've not had a word about the 350 million pound that we're supposed to have every week for the NHS. And, you know, one of the reasons why the British people vote to exit the European Union is because of the promises that was made by the Michael Gove and Nigel Farage and Boris, saying that every week we're going to be having 350 million invested in the NHS.
So to move to the question, although of course the Prime Minister didn't stand by that bus, but I sense your question is, where's the 350 million pounds? Is that right, Max?
Yes.
It is. OK, stay on the line. Prime Minister, of course you weren't by that bus. Was that figure correct?
Well, there were questions about the figure, but actually that figure is not the one to focus on now, because Max, what I can tell you is this. What we're going to do is, first of all, when we leave the EU, we won't be sending, the vast amounts of money to the EU every year that we do at the moment. That means we will have money to spend on priorities like the NHS. But look, I don't know, what can I ask you what you do in the NHS, Max?
Max, what do you do?
Well, I work in the pathology department. I'm not going to actually say specifically.
No, that's fine.
No,
just to give the Prime Minister a broad glimpse.
Gives me a
Prime
broad
Minister.
idea of what you do, and thank you for the work that you and everybody else who works so hard for us all in the NHS does. But the key thing about the NHS is the government has said this is our number one spending priority, and we have already committed that we're going to be putting more money into the NHS. We've set out that we'll be putting more money into the NHS over the next 5 years, and it will mean £394 million more a week going into our National Health Service. We believe that's important. And that's, the NHS is going to produce a 10-year plan so that we can really look to ensure that we're securing the future of the NHS, which is, an institution that is not only loved by everybody up and down the country, but really does fantastic work day in and day out.
Was Boris Johnson right to have stood by that bus 2 and a bit years ago?
Well, this is a commitment that the government is making now. Yes, we can get some money back from the European Union, but actually it's 394.
So he was
million.
right to stand by the bus.
It's 394 million that we will be putting into the NHS per week.
So he was right to stand by the bus, Boris Johnson.
Well, the point Boris was making was, and the point people in the referendum was making, was that if we don't send vast amounts of money to the EU every year, we can spend it on our priorities back home. The NHS is one of the things we can spend that money on, but actually we're making a commitment which is, if you like, over and above that question of bringing money back from the European Union, because we think the NHS is so important to people.
All right. There's a story from Simon Kempton, who's the operational policing lead for the Police Federation of England and Wales today, saying, coming back to the idea of a no deal, police would be facing a very, very steep learning process if the UK were to leave the EU without a deal. Does this mean, do you have concerns that the police couldn't cope? How real are Mr Kempton's worries?
Well,
He's the operational policing lead for the Police Fed.
One of the things, obviously, that we're doing within the deal is making sure that some of the arrangements that currently exist to enable us, for example, to share data with the other countries in the European Union, for example, on DNA matching and things like that can sometimes be really important in solving crimes, is still available to us. Now, if there was a no deal, of course, if we just crashed out without a deal, then that wouldn't immediately be available to us. So we would have to work at ensuring that we were able to put that into practice. Police forces, of course, do cooperate across borders outside of the formal arrangements that take place.
All right. Tom's in Crouch End. Tom, you're through to the Prime Minister. Go ahead.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Good morning, Nick.
Hello.
With the loss of 20,000 police officers undoubtedly having some impact on a rise in violent crime, do you not think that it's time to reverse the cuts to funding, and do you not think the £39 billion settlement could be better spent on reversing cuts at home?
Well, Tom, first of all, good morning. Thanks for your question, because I know people are really concerned about the rise in violent crime that they've seen. And we have put a number of things in place to make sure that we can help the police to work with this. One of the things, of course, is giving the police some extra powers to deal with violent crime. We've got a bill going through Parliament at the moment, called the Offensive Weapons Bill, that will be part of that, although we've already taken some action to improve the ability to send people to prison in relation to knife crime offences. The reason why crime crime, we see these rise in crime is very mixed. It's diverse. There's a number of reasons for it. A lot of violent crime is linked to drugs. Now, we've set out a new drug strategy to try to deal with that whole question of drugs. But so I think we need to look at how we can help in dealing with these issues around violent crime, particularly knife crime for youngsters. One of the messages to young people is if you carry a knife, you're more likely to be a victim of a knife crime.
But do the police need more resources? Do the police need more resources?
Well, we're actually putting more resources into the police.
Weren't you the Home Secretary who said they were crying wolf at a police federation meeting once, Prime Minister?
Well, I'm not sure if I used exactly that phrase, Nick, but what I did say, and I've always said to the police, is there tends to be an assumption that the only question can ever be about funding and numbers. And actually, there's so much more to dealing with crime. So on knife crime for young people, for example, actually working with young people to make sure they don't carry knives because they'll be more likely to be a victim if they do is an important part of
Stop and search tactic, Prime Minister?
Using stop and search properly.
Right, because again, you did order as Home Secretary. You said they needed to rein it in.
Well, you were
concerned about it being divisive.
No, what I said was two things. First of all, use stop and search, but do it lawfully.
Yes.
What we discovered was a quarter of the stops and searches being conducted by our police,
young black males,
were not being done lawfully.
Yeah,
and I said,
concerned about that. Yeah.
Secondly, you shouldn't be stopped on the streets of our country simply because of the colour of your skin.
I know, I was there. I remember that.
And stop and search is a really effective tool.
But with hindsight,
when the
police
use it
responding
properly,
to you as Home Secretary, with hindsight, did they dial down stop and search a little too much?
Well, I remember at one Police Federation conference, somebody did ask me, why can we no longer use stop and search? And I said, no, it's not that. You can use it, just use it properly. Because when you use it properly, it's really effective. And actually, from the latest figures, we see the arrest rate related to stop and search has gone up.
Do you think we're getting on top of the crime issue then?
I think there's more for us to do on the crime issue. I think what we're doing in terms of our offensive weapons bill, I think what we're doing in terms of a serious violence strategy is important. And but can I come, because Tom also...
Of course, absolutely, Prime Minister.
Tom, you mentioned the 39 billion
the 39
as
billion,
well.
yes, I was going to
And I just wanted to make this point. Actually, whatever happens, there was some money we'd be due to pay to the EU, our legal obligations. And, I just think we're a country that stands by our legal obligations.
Tom, thank you. A couple of questions via the emails, texts and tweets. This from Rachel in Bexley. Which resignation annoyed you more, Esther McVeigh or Dominic Raab?
Look, I don't want to see any of my cabinet colleagues who've been doing a good job in the cabinet feeling the need to resign. I'm very sorry that both Dom and Esther felt that they needed to leave the cabinet. They'd done great work, and as I say, I'm sorry when anybody feels the need to leave the cabinet.
OK. Jamie in Loughborough, how important is it that you keep Michael Gove on your team sheet? Perhaps picking up on your cricket metaphor, I don't know. Yeah. How important is it that Michael Gove stays in the team?
Michael's done a really important job at DEFRA. Often people don't think about how individual government departments are having to prepare for leaving the European Union. Actually, Michael's department is the one that has, in terms of legislation, probably more preparation than anybody else.
But you can't afford to lose him, can you?
He's been doing a great job, and particularly doing a great job, as I think I said earlier in response to your question, Nick.
When I wanted to go down the bookies, yes.
On fishing industry.
But you can't afford to lose him today, can you?
I want all of my colleagues in the cabinet to feel able to carry on doing the excellent job that they're doing.
Right, so you want him still there. OK. Gary in Acton, you're on the radio to the Prime Minister. Go ahead, Gary. Good morning.
Hi. First of all, can I say thank you so much for everything you've done for this country, Theresa May. I can imagine the negotiations with the EU politicians hasn't been easy. So if you look at the reaction from Guy Verhofstadt and Michel Barnier today, you can see that obviously they've got the better deal, not us. Don't you think Jacob Rees-Mogg is the person to lead us at the moment?
Let's put the question. It was a bit clicky and bangy. Did you get all of that?
I think I got all of that.
The EU have got the lion's share of the deal. You should step aside. Let Jacob Rees-Mogg take the helm.
No. Well, Gary, first of all, thank you. You actually, a lot of people look at this and think, well, the UK is the only side that's given anything is the UK. Actually, that's not the case.
Really?
The EU. Yeah. Oh, Nick, you say really with a quizzical look. Yeah. Look. Earlier on today. Earlier on in this time, I mentioned a couple of things that the EU have given in on.
The border.
There's the border and European Court of Justice.
Right.
Look, from the European Union's point of view, even when we leave, they would like to see in a whole range of areas the European Court of Justice still having jurisdiction over us.
Right.
We're very clear that that cannot be the case, and that's what we've negotiated. There are other areas too where the European Union has felt that a particular approach is right, and we've said no. We've held out. We've held our ground, and they've given in to us. And this isn't, but it's a negotiation. And any negotiation, complex as it is actually a negotiation which leads to compromises.
But Britain's still in a customs union. We take rules without influencing them. Northern Ireland, I argue, is treated differently, and the country has this for as long a period, and we can't walk away unless they agree to it. And you tell me this is a good deal.
No, look, this is not the deal of a future relationship with the European Union. The deal of the future relationship with the European Union means we take back control of our laws, we end free movement, take back control of our borders, take back control of our money so we can spend it on priorities like the NHS. We're out of the customs union, we're out of the single market, we're out of the common agricultural policy, we're out of the common fisheries policy. That's what I think people voted for. That's what I'm delivering.
Will the Cabinet get a free vote?
We're going to be looking at the deal when it comes back. There is cabinet collective responsibility in this country, which, there's government policy is government policy.
So they won't get a free vote?
Nick, you're asking me to look about issues around the vote before we've even actually finalised the deal with the European Union.
Okay.
We're finalising the deal with the European Union on the 25th of the summit is European Council summit, call it what you will, is set for the 25th of November. I will then obviously bring that deal back to Parliament, and as I say, it'll be up to members of Parliament to then do their job and say, is this a deal that's good for my constituents? Is it a deal that's going to protect jobs? And that's one of the things that's really driven, because, people listening here, there'll be people listening to this programme this morning whose jobs depend on supply chains which are heavily linked with parts of Europe. So anybody working in car manufacturers, for example, I want to make sure those jobs stay here in the UK.
So it could be a free vote?
I didn't say... Look, Nick, there is cabinet responsibility. Right. Government will put its position to the House of Commons.
Ellen's in Alicante, perhaps appropriate enough. Ellen, good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Good morning, Prime Minister.
Good morning.
I'm an expat in Alicante.
Yes.
So you can imagine we're sitting on thorns here wondering what's happening. But all I'd like to say, my sympathy goes to you, Prime Minister. These people that started all this off have all walked away and left you to it, and then just want to stand on the sidelines and start shouting. And I've got every sympathy for that.
And if I can move you to your question, Ellen, please. Sorry.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
My question is, we've been speaking with the British consulate with meetings, and at the moment it appears that if it goes ahead, what your plan is, Prime Minister, that we will still be okay for healthcare, and as long as you're resident in the country. But what will happen to the Brits that are in the EU if you come out with nothing?
Well, thanks very much for your question, Ellen. You're absolutely right. One of the things we've negotiated, and I put it at the forefront of the negotiations, right at the beginning, was this question of the rights of both people from other EU countries living in the UK, but also UK citizens living in other EU countries like yourself there in Spain. And those rights have been protected. If there's no deal, I have said that EU citizens living here in the UK will continue to have their rights protected. And I would expect other countries in the EU to do the same for UK citizens living in their country. And I know, when I've spoken to the Spanish government, I know how important that interaction and UK citizens are to them. So I would hope that other countries will show the same respect for people who've chosen to live, you've chosen to live in Spain, there'll be Spanish people who've chosen to live here in the UK.
When you go and negotiate with the EU, how welcoming are they towards you?
Well, they are welcoming. I'm a fellow leader. I sit around the table with them. And remember, when I'm sitting around the table with them, we're not just discussing Brexit. There are other issues we're talking about that are important across Europe, like our security issues, migration, working together in some of the flows of migration that we've seen.
But after a terribly difficult day with Tusk and Michel Barnier and Juncker and whoever else it might be, how do you relax? What do you do? Read a book? Listen to music? What do you do?
Well, there's a variety of things I do. In order to relax, I enjoy going for a walk in the countryside if I can.
We can't do that on the train coming back.
Not so easy on the train or plane coming back.
No, maybe.
Well, on the plane coming back from Brussels, the office have probably got a whole load of work for me to read.
Right, OK. And you allow yourself a drink, I think you said once before, don't you?
Oh, from time to time, Nick.
Well, I think
yes.
you probably need to, don't you? You've also employed the cricketing metaphor. Why is Jeff Boycott such a hero of yours?
Well, because the thing about Geoffrey Boycott was he was absolutely steady. He kept there at the crease. He carried on. He, if you like, just relentlessly went for his goal, and I think that's important.
I've collected some quotes at other cricketers and people. Which one defines you, do you think? Jeff Boycott is, quotes, truly world-class, quotes, bloody-minded, quotes, stubborn, quotes, unable to play in a team. Which ones apply to you, Prime Minister?
Well, as you might recall, Nick, Ken Clarke did once say I was a bloody difficult woman.
So we'll go for that one.
Maybe.
And lastly, do you know how Jeff Boycott ended his last first-class innings?
Now, this is racking my brain.
Yes.
Actually, I can't remember.
No. He was run out by one of his own men, a guy called Jim Love from Yorkshire. Michael Gove's not your Jim Love, is he, Prime Minister?
I think Michael Gove's Scottish.
Say again?
I said, I think Michael Gove's Scottish.
Michael Gove. A good answer, thank you. So he's not Jim Love. Final call goes to John in Gillingham. John, you're on the radio. What are you going to say?
Thank you, Nick. Good morning, Prime Minister.
Good morning, John.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask you, do you consider yourself the modern-day Chamberlain, who also went to Europe and negotiated with a foreign power and came back having appeased that foreign power and having not stood up for our country? And I would like you to stand up for our country and stand up for what's best for our country, and appeasing a foreign power and locking us in forever. He's not doing that.
From sport,
John,
so final question, a bit of history. Prime Minister.
John, no, I don't. And the reason is this. We're not going to be locked in forever to something that we don't want. What we're doing is negotiating a deal that means that we can take back control of our borders. Free movement will end once and for all. That we take back control of our money. We won't be sending vast sums of money to the EU every year. We take back control of our laws. We won't be under the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. We come out of some of the things that people have been really concerned about for years. Common agricultural policy, common fisheries policy. We're out of the customs union, out of the single market. I think that's what people voted for, and that's what I'm delivering.
Prime Minister, thanks for joining me here on LBC. When News is next.
Theresa May has faced a call to stand down as Prime Minister, taking calls live on LBC. The Prime Minister's again vowed to press ahead with her plans for Brexit, but insists she does